I'd been living in my house for about a year before the knocking started. It didn't happen often, probably once every 6 to 8 weeks. They would only be 1 or 2 knocks each time, and they always came from the woods behind my house. I never got a close-up view of what made them. We're always obscured by the trees or other cover. It was broadly sized, a solid dark color, and appeared to stand upright. I nicknamed it Whoop because that's exactly how the weird call it seemed to make sounded. I definitely heard it whooping more often than knocking. I'd always try to answer, but could never get another reply. Now, I'm sure I know what you're thinking, and before all this happened, I never thought of or knew much about anything like Bigfoot or ghosts or the paranormal. And to reiterate, I still don't know what whoop even is, because I never got an actual clear visual. If anything like that existed, I thought it just added more mystery to the world. I came out here to live a quiet, simple life. I don't want fame, attention, or publicity, and figuring Whoop wanted the same. Provided we keep our boundaries, I thought the two of us could have a peaceful coexistence. Shortly after the knocking began, my garden and animal pens started getting raided at night. It only happened once every so often, but something would pillage my crops, my fruit trees, even steal 1 or 2 of my farm animals. My garden and pens kept all kinds of animals of all sizes. This was the first time I'd ever had a problem, but since whatever was doing this managed to slip in and slip out with ease, I quickly realized that it was Whoop. I tried using trail cameras to catch an image of it, and maybe act as a bit of a deterrent. It worked at first, but Whoop eventually found a way around the cameras, and, if it had to, it smashed or knocked them off the post. After this happened a few more times, it became evident that Whoop's nighttime visits occurred on the same day I heard the knocking. Discovering this correlation made me pay close attention to the details of Whoop's nocturnal marauding, which made me notice another pattern. It always either ransacked the garden or the animal pens, and never did both on the same night. When I aligned the number of knocks I heard each time, and which section was subsequently raided, another pattern became clear. 1 knock meant gardens. 2 knocks meant pens. The knocks, I thought, have to mean it was hungry, and whether it wanted a carnivorous or herbivorous meal. The next time I heard Whoop knocking, I put that theory to the test. It was a single loud knock that came around dusk, and was actually followed by a quick whoop about 15 minutes later. 1 knock should mean garden, so I filled a bowl with fruits and vegetables and grains and nuts, and laid it out on a large flat rock about 20 yards from the tree line. I was hoping an offering like this would be my way of letting Whoop know I understood its message, and it would turn away from the garden. Sure enough, it worked. I saw no sign of any disturbance in my garden the next morning, and everything I left for it on the rock was gone. This became my protocol whenever I heard the knocking, and it worked every time. Then, a few months later, my boyfriend Jesse moved in with me, and the knocking stopped. Nothing happened for about 5 to 6 months, and I figured Whoop must have just left the area. I told Jesse about the knocking, and the offerings I left for it. Naturally, he was skeptical about it, and when nothing happened those first few months after he moved in, it was hard to not blame him for thinking I was just crazy. Then, out of nowhere, the knocking resumed. I was sitting on my back porch one evening, admiring the diamond necklace Jesse surprised me with when he came home earlier that day. It had a silver chain and a heart-shaped diamond charm that was light pink in color with gold earrings, and glimmered wondrously in the sunset. I actually jumped upon hearing the knock. It was clear as day, and coming no more than 50 feet from inside the tree line. I should have been delighted to hear a sign from Whoop, but something was oddly different about these knocks. Something that just didn't sit right. This time, there were 3. 3 deep, hollow-sounding knocks. The first 2 were practically back-to-back, but the third came a few seconds later, throwing me off my guard. Whoop never knocked 3 times. What did that mean? What did 3 mean? Hoping to cover all my bases, I laid out a spread of fruits, vegetables, even fish, sweets, and other random items on the offering rock. Jesse didn't hear the knocking when it happened, but played along anyway, despite emphatically reiterating his skepticism. When I woke up the next morning, there didn't seem to be any disturbance in the garden or the pens. It looked like my offering worked, or so I thought. Upon stepping outside, I spotted something on my back patio. A large clump of knotty, thick, dark brown hair that I noticed had a streak of pink highlighting it. I went to pick it up, but immediately dropped it and stumbled back into the kitchen, struggling to maintain my balance while comprehending what I had just saw. There was more than just hair in that clump. It was an entire human scalp. I sprung into the living room to get Jesse and spilled onto the floor upon entering. I could only frantically point towards the kitchen back door and sputter panicked gibberish until Jesse managed to calm my nerves by firmly holding me in place. There, out there, the patio it's something. I couldn't even make complete sentences. Hair! The hair! Jesse looked more confused than worried. He got me onto the couch, saying he'd check it out, but wanted me to stay put until he returned. I heard Jesse open the kitchen door and step outside, where he remained for about 5 minutes, which to me felt like hours. I was flooded with relief upon hearing Jesse step back inside and make his way down the hall, but he gave me an answer I didn't expect. "There's nothing out there. What exactly did you see?" Jesse said as he entered the living room. Despite what he said, Jesse's face had almost no color, and he wore his flustered, petrified expression like he had just seen a ghost. The worry on Jesse's face made me feel horrible for scaring him like this, but there was no disputing what I'd seen. "Jesse, when I went outside, there was a clump of hair out on the patio," I shakily replied. "Not just hair, but an entire human scalp. It was placed there by something." I brought up calling the police, but Jesse quickly interjected. "What are you going to tell them? The thing that lives in the woods behind your house put a human scalp on your back porch? Then, what, took it back?" Jesse asked with a notable tinge of sarcasm. "Even if they didn't think you were crazy, they can't do anything without proof, and according to you, it vanished." Jesse wasn't fond of the law, but he made a point. Despite my reluctance, I went back outside with him to poke around, but found no trace of a human scalp. It was moved, I thought. There was only one animal around here that could have done it with such impeccable covertness, and if that was the case, the prospect of being able to get that close without me knowing still keeps me up at night. When I checked the offering rock, nothing I left out was touched, which made me even more unsettled. Jesse tried convincing me I mistook it for something else, but again, I knew what I saw. Jesse managed to put me down for a nap later that day. It was dusk when I woke up, and despite regaining some composure, I felt no less on edge. The house, I noticed, contained an eerie stillness. I called for him, but he didn't respond. I went downstairs and found a note from Jesse in the kitchen, saying he had to make an emergency shipment for work and would be gone for a few days. Jesse was a truck driver. He travels a lot, so last-minute jobs springing up like this are nothing uncommon. I tried to call his phone, but it went straight to voicemail, which wasn't unusual since reception out of town was subpar at best, and stayed like that for quite a while. Nonetheless, I was now completely alone in the house, and at a time when the last thing I wanted to be was by myself. I thought about leaving, but it was already dark, and I didn't even feel comfortable venturing beyond the front door. Before going to bed, I made sure that every light in the house was on, and an opening or entrance was closed and locked. Remarkably, the night passed without incident. Although the next few days were uneventful, I still couldn't get in touch with Jesse. Whenever I called him, his phone went straight to voicemail. Although he claimed not to find anything, the expression on Jesse's face that morning said differently. I feared Jesse actually saw the severed scalp, maybe even caught a glimpse of Whoop, and was so spooked it made him leave. Most of his belongings were still here, though, and it was too uncharacteristic of him to be unreachable, so I was assuming the worst. While trying to make sense of Jesse's abrupt departure, I continued obsessing over Whoop's gruesome gift, and a few days later, the questions I had some answers. The police showed up one morning and said they had to use my backyard so they could access a crime scene in the woods. Turns out some hikers stumbled across 5 bodies at the bottom of a ravine, about a mile away from my house. Investigators said the bodies were initially buried, but got dug up by some kind of large animal. It not only exhumed all 5 corpses, but apparently ate and dismembered large sections of the bodies. I was certain that Whoop had committed these grisly killings, and my suspicions were confirmed after seeing a photo of one of the victims. Her name was Heather. She'd been missing for about 2 months. She had a pretty face with gleaming green eyes and beautiful brown hair, which contained a prominent pink highlight streak. That human scalp I found the other day, it belonged to a woman. But then, the case took a very different turn. Despite the body's battered conditions, investigators managed to identify all 5 victims. They were mostly prostitutes, junkies, and drifters. They were all from different parts of the country and had no connection to our town or the surrounding area. Autopsies revealed every one of them had died from strangulation or blunt force trauma, which to me still implicated Whoop. There still had to be some sort of underlying connection, explaining why these victims wound up here of all places, and I found that link when looking at the picture of another victim. When I saw it, my feet almost buckled. The necklace that woman had worn in the photo, silver chain with a heart-shaped pink diamond and gold edges, was the same one I'd got from Jesse. Whoop hadn't killed those people. It was Jesse. I went to the police and told them about the necklace, but didn't say anything about the human scalp. They searched my house and found a stash of random items belonging to all 5 victims, which they said were probably trophies Jesse kept as mementos, likely as a way to remember the murders. I never heard from Jesse again. He's still at large. Detectives think he could also be behind some other unsolved disappearances and murders that happened in the spots along the trucking route. They're still investigating. Once I put the pieces together, I painted a macabre picture. Jesse, my boyfriend, killed 5 people. He must have encountered them along his trucking route and brought the bodies back here to be buried. It's unclear if Jesse held them captive before killing them, or did it immediately and hauled their corpses around, both of which are equally disturbing scenarios. Looking back at the day Jesse left, I think he did see the human scalp, and disposed of it himself after realizing it came from one of his victims. Jesse fled, but only to avoid getting caught. Whoop was the catalyst behind his departure, but not because it was trying to protect or give me a warning. It just wanted to eat. Whoop must have come across Jesse's burial site on its own, or followed Jesse during one of his drop-offs. This also made me realize what the 3 knocks had meant. It was hungry for human meat. After eating those bodies, Whoop must have developed a taste for human flesh. And here's why I'm certain that's the case. One night last weekend, a solo camper went missing in the same stretch of woods behind my house. On the same evening of her disappearance, I heard 3 loud knocks coming from the woods. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. If you haven't already, I always suggest hit that subscribe button, maybe go ahead and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the great stories that we do here. I've got a link below to my latest book if you'd like to pick up your own copy. Follow the link below down to Amazon, and if you'd prefer a signed one, get up with me. I'm sure we can work something out. If you'd like to support the show in a more monetary way, might I suggest heading on down to Patreon. We have several tiers. I'm sure you'll find something that'll suit you. I always recommend my $10 tier, which is my Ghostly Reader tier. You get a signed copy of my book on your doorstep anytime I write one, which is, on average, about twice a year. Speaking of my awesome patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, And thanks to Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.